Greetings and welcome to episode 13 of the Creative Train podcast, The Rules of Engagement. And we're going to go all over the place a little bit with this today. We're going to talk about things from social media manners to imposter syndrome and the fake it till you make it approach when promoting yourself as an artist. I know there'll be something in here that everybody can relate to, even if you're not an artist. Maybe what will also happen is it'll help define and refine your approach to self-promotion as an artist. All aboard? The Rules of Engagement. How's that for a clickbait headline, eh? I'll open with one of my favorite quotes from Mike Tyson, actually. And he says something to the effect of, social media has made people far too comfortable with disrespecting other people and not getting punched in the face for it. And that was kind of like the seed notion for this idea of episode 13. Not that I'm going to start punching people in the face. Of course not. But it has to do with the face, the image, the vibe we choose to put out there of us as artists and creatives. Now, there's an impossible amount of examples out there, and I know you've seen them. You've experienced them, and maybe you've even been one of them. And that is people designing an artificial version of themselves to present to the world, a facade. And usually it has something to do with photos of yourself being edited, certain things edited in, edited out, or pictures of yourself with expensive things you've bought, like cars, jewelry, clothing, or whatever. But for creatives, it often tends to be a very obtuse version of the fake it till you make it mindset. So what I'm getting at here are the folks that present themselves as someone who is either much more skilled than they are by lying about their successes or misportraying their successes, or maybe they are much more better connected than all of us. You know, those name droppers. I absolutely hate that most about this kind of behavior, because as I see it and feel it, it is the most inauthentic means of self-promotion, because it's more like self-aggrandizement or self-inflation, associating yourself with the name of someone who's generally seen as really good or very successful or skilled or more productive than that name dropper might be. In my 30-some years of being a professional musician, I hear this kind of thing on an almost daily basis. That is at least when I choose to interact with other people. And it's always the same old stories being delivered the same way by the same people, about the same people. And I'm supposed to stand there doing what? Listening with my eyes wide, gasping at the marvels of this other person's life experience? No, not for me, thanks. I'll always find a way to remove myself from these kinds of conversations. I think the motivation behind this kind of behavior, though, can be many different things. Maybe the other person feels somehow threatened by you and your own reputation or artistry, and they need to artificially push themselves up by name dropping about who they know or who they have worked with, or want you to believe they know or have worked with. Or maybe they really have worked with these people, and since then, nothing of any real consequence has happened for them. So they live this loop of glorious past experiences with no real news of their own. But even more insidious is the notion of them not trying to elevate themselves as much as to put others down and to make them question their abilities and experiences, and do all this in the shadow of the story of someone who's spinning in front of them. Yeah, name dropping and the fake it till you make it attitude are very confusing things for those of us who just actually keep working and creating, trying new things, and actually do the work we say we do. But also to have the ability to say, honestly, when we're taking time away from one project to dedicate to another. I took this whole past summer away from stained glass art just as my re-entry to the business of commissioned glass work was taking off again for the second time in my artistic career. And I did it for a few reasons. One was to devote more time to outdoor work, to focus on design, because largely my attic studio is too hot to work comfortably in during the summer months. But luckily here in central Ontario, Canada, that's really only 3-month hiatus. But I made a point of posting about that on my glass art social media pages and didn't pretend that I'm still hard at work in the glass studio, because I told some people with commissions that they're going to have to wait till the fall, and they were happy with that. These cooler months for me revolve around music creation and glass art, and it's really hard to have to put away certain projects and reprioritize for others. But I have to do that. There's simply not enough hours in the day to do all the things I want to do, let alone do those things and go to work. If you also have to do this kind of thing, you'll understand it and you'll feel it. But if you've never had to walk away from things you're passionate about so that you can give time and energy to other things you're also passionate about, it's a really tough thing to reconcile. Almost leaves you feeling guilty to yourself. But as seasons shift and change, my motivations also shift and change. And it's a cycle that I'm not always happy about, but I live with it and I work with it. Lately, I've been reading a lot about body language, psychology of it, and those often hidden messages people put out there completely unconsciously, using their voice tone, eye movements, and other subtle things such as eye position, breathing, and hand movement. It's a fascinating thing to put yourself under such scrutiny on a moment-to-moment basis and really give yourself an honest examination of not just the vibe you're putting out there, but the actual physical signs about your inner workings. One of the authors I've been particularly enjoying mentioned a highly praised, investigated, proven, utilized technique for not only filtering out acquaintances, but is also regularly used in interrogating possible criminal offenders and possible terrorist agents. And his belief is that the face we put out to the world is the opposite of our true self. In other words, it's the face of the things we wish we were or aspire to be. But it is the opposite, because perhaps we harbor some kind of revulsion or that guilt towards those things we see in ourselves that we don't like, and we've chosen a means of outward expression that reflects our idealized self. And this ties in quite neatly to some of the points I made earlier. Fake it till you make it, the name dropping, and those highly edited, dubious social media photo posts. Those name droppers, etc., want you to feel you are not part of a particular club or friends circle because you don't have the stories about those people that they do. You have not only been not included in the now, but you have already been dismissed in the past. It's like they're subtly saying, you're not part of that shared glory, and I'm going to make you relive all of your self-doubts you've ever had by reminding you of what you have and will continue to miss out on. I've had many conversations with fellow musicians who only seem to be able to talk about their past gigs, who and where they were, and how awesome they are busting out jams in their basements as well. But they don't ever seem to recall that they've told these stories dozens of times already. And it's like this roll of self-delusional tape spinning in their head. And all they can do is let that tape play whenever they open their mouth. It actually got to the point with one particular fella when I had to say, yeah, I remember. That's likely the 20th time you've told me that exact story. And he just smiled and said, yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday. I'm like, wow. There has to be some sort of clinical name for this type of behavior because it genuinely comes across like some kind of mental illness. Whether it is, in fact, or has been an adopted behavior and allowed to grow unchecked and fed by the constant pursuit of gratification and ego support from social media, I can't really speak to any person's particular case. But it's really challenging to have these types of people around you and not become cynical about them as people beyond just their attitude and the persona they're trying to portray, while politely trying to accommodate them in social situations. The point of this is how to keep your creativity, artistry, productivity, and ego in check as an artist or creator in those moments when you feel, maybe a bit fragile because maybe you've let yourself down on some goals. If there is one thing I hope you can take away from this, is that you should know that nobody ever falls for those stories of days gone by more than once. And if you find yourself in conversation looking to bust out one of these gems from your tome of experience, just don't, please. You should always take pride in your accomplishments and always hold your highest aspirations before you. But don't let your past experiences become the only thing you can talk about in the now. It's like people that you know fairly well. You're not great friends or anything, but you're friends on Facebook. And you see them, once every couple months in person. And all they do is talk about the things they saw on Facebook. It's like their life doesn't exist anymore outside of Facebook. Anyway, if you're struggling with your craft and talking about such things with fellow creators, try a more honest approach and try to open the door to discussion about those blocks or obstacles you're experiencing. And you'll end up in a much more honest and real and hopefully inspiring conversation, which just might benefit both parties because of that injection of honesty and integrity. And this is where that dreaded imposter syndrome comes up. Despite your having all the best intentions and motivations, some creators simply feel like they don't measure up to anything, anywhere, ever. Imposter syndrome is a mental state in which you feel like you're actually an imposter, kind of pretending that you are who you are and trying to project that to the world. It's hard to say what leads people to this state, but it seems like the result of chronic self-doubt that roots itself in the mind, and despite the person actually creating and designing and doing the thing, they feel like they're somehow faking it, not doing it right. I participated in a long post on a Facebook group of entrepreneurs about a few weeks ago, and the conversation revolved around what had become a debilitating state of the imposter syndrome for one member, to the point where she had lost all confidence in not only her skills, but her long-term, short-term goals and aspirations. And she couldn't even look back on her past successes and feel good about them. She felt like she just pretended her way through her evolution as an entrepreneur. Seeking help and input from the group was probably pretty hard to do, but it's practically anonymous, which goes back to Mike Tyson's comment at the beginning. The range of comments from the other members ranged from, the old sending thoughts and prayers kind of thing, to people actually laughing at her mental state, and to people with genuine caring and supportive insights. It was hard to read through it all. Some people just don't get it. And if you don't get it, that's okay. But there's no need to mock someone and try to make them feel weak or less. It's a terrible thing to do. It's unlikely that there's a one and done fix for the imposter syndrome. I've been there myself. And for me, the best thing is always to listen back to my previous albums and singles, listen to my demos and compare them to the finished product, to look at my sketches for glass panels or boxes, and then looking at the photos of them or the product itself when they're done. And it's really challenging to live as an artist in a society which places little to no priority on such things, especially if they don't make money. Everyone takes things much more seriously when there's a dollar figure attached to it. But remembering that not every creative person has aspirations of selling their work is very important. Their mental and spiritual health benefits of doing anything creative at all simply cannot have a price tag attached to it. In the short time I spent working with a mental health counselor that I mentioned in the episode previous to this, I kept returning to the fact that this was probably the least creative I had been in years. And that if I could get myself back into the rhythm and flow of glass, music, or whatever, that hopefully that momentum would lift me out of the rut that I found myself in. And it worked. But in that time when I doubted the viability of every single thing I even felt slightly motivated to do, from washing the dishes to designing new projects, it was really, really hard to get unstuck. So what I did was I set aside time every morning after breakfast. And, for a couple of days, I poked around in my glass studio, sorting scraps by color and size and putting them into boxes of various sizes. And my creative brain started to kick in and imagine what I could do with these scraps. I remembered the projects the scraps came from, and I eventually got down to finishing a large panel for the bathroom door, which had been left undone, half done, for 10 years. I don't really recall anything of value being said to me by the counselor. It was mostly her trying to get me to talk about my state of mind following the passing of my wife in 2017. And these were things I had already journaled and spoken about with friends and family in various situations. But I suppose what that counseling did is not point me to actual verbiage and methods to help, but it pointed my mind and my heart to the real issue, in that I had practically abandoned my creative pursuits. That was the thing that seemed to fix me, getting back and doing the thing. The counselor had very little input on things like creativity. She would just say, "Oh, I'm not very creative. I can't draw. I can't cook, whatever," and never really got talking about that. She was certain that everything was related to something else, not my lack of creativity. If you have this type of thing going on in your life at the moment, reach out and we can certainly talk about it. Or just leave a comment if you found any of the points in this relatable. Because I believe the more we discuss these things, from the fakers to the name droppers to the imposter syndrome, the better we will all be as creatives. It's always about perspective. And when we lose or have our perspective skewed, either by a malicious outside force or our own self-damning behaviors, we also lose touch with a very deep and essential part of ourselves, and that's the inner artist. No matter what your experience level is, if you are motivated and inspired, consider yourself an artist. Keep your motivations pure, and that is a winning combination. And those are my big thoughts for the day. It's Thanksgiving weekend here in Canada. It is a beautiful, crisp mid-October afternoon out there. So now that I'm done all this blabbering and editing, I'm going to head outside, enjoy the sunshine, throw a stick for the dog, maybe pick up some cool-looking leaves and try and make something out of it. I don't know. I got to get outside, though. It's too nice a day to be inside anymore. Thanks for listening, folks. I hope you learned something.